All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the e-commerce revolution. We're going to be doing these off and on throughout the rest of the year and into 2022 and beyond. And we're coming to you today both on video as well as audio. Video, you can get that through YouTube, and audio wherever you listen to your podcast. My name is Ramin. I'm one of the managing partners at SKU Agency, and it's great to have everybody here today. Our goal for each and every one of these episodes is to both educate you and entertain you on all things e-commerce. And I do believe we can entertain you on e-commerce. It is an entertaining topic, especially when we figure out how to grow our business and take things to the next level. So let's get things started.
This is just the beginning.
So let me ask you guys a question. Have you ever visited a website and just felt that that website really knew who you were and what you were looking at? As if you walked into a physical brick and mortar store and the salesperson knew you, they brought you products that you had maybe looked at before, they knew what you wanted, they knew how to match things up. Well, in the online world, that's considered personalization or site personalization. It's a technology that Amazon has been using for a long time, and it is incredibly effective. You might think this cutting edge technology is out of reach for e-commerce merchants, but that's absolutely not true. Not true at all. So let me say this. We're really super excited to have today's guest on. Not only is he an expert on the topic of personalization, he's also a web and e-commerce veteran. And that's true to my heart because I feel that I'm a veteran, so it's always nice to talk to other veterans. He's built websites on Perl, which is a term I have not used and said in a long time. Okay. And he's also built sites on Drupal with big brands like OZZY Osbourne. I think hopefully we all knew who OZZY Osbourne is while he was at Rain City Studios. In 2009, he did what every smart expert would do. He started an agency called Jibe, which is still in operation in Vancouver, Canada, and focuses on e-commerce. And about a year ago, he sold his interest in Jibe and decided to join the team at LimeSpot, which is a personalization app focused for Shopify merchants. Today, he holds the title of Head of Global Partnerships at LimeSpot, and I recently met him while we were vetting some personalization software for a client. And I knew instantly I had to learn more about him. I had to have him on. I had to ask him all kinds of questions, probably maybe that kindred spirit of both being veterans in the web and e-commerce space really made me think, you know what? I need to know more. I need to absolutely know more about him. So on top of all these different things that he's done and all the different hats that he's worn, he's planted over 1 million trees. How many of us can say that we've planted even maybe one tree? He's planted over 1 million trees. He's also an investor in a bass fishing performance apparel brand, both of which we have to learn more about. I mean, these are very, very interesting things. And something that I noticed when I was looking at his LinkedIn profile, he has the word founder, the title founder, next to 6 out of the 9 job listings he has on his LinkedIn profile. So today we have a true entrepreneur here to talk to us. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Francis Pilon. And he, by the way, we practiced how to say his name with a French accent. So hopefully I did it justice. Wonderful. Francis, it is a true pleasure to have you on the e-commerce revolution podcast today. Thank you for making the time. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ramin. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think we do cross, intersection in a number of areas, as you mentioned. I feel weird about the veteran thing, but I do feel strongly about so obviously I looked at your previous video cast that you did with your business partner and learned a little bit about you as well through this. Since there's a side to entertainment, I want to say something though before we start, which is probably going to make you chuckle. So I do have so I'm originally from Montreal, so what you hear, the accent you hear under the hood is French. And I go one day to the bank, and then the till person asks me, "So what's your name?" I say, "Francis Pilon." And she looks at me in a weird way. I say, "What's going on?" I said, "Did you say princess?" And so I that was the most butchered version of everything I've ever heard this far. So you did a really good job. And
Well,
thank you for that.
I appreciate it. As you can imagine, with my last name being Ram Hormozi, I used to be the guy in class where when the teacher paused and looked like they were struggling, I just raised my hand. I said, "I'm right here. Don't even try to say the name." So I appreciate anytime names can be complex, even though when you look at the spelling of it, your name looks very easy. So it's great. Well, tell me, so before we get started, I have to know a few things. You know, in the intake on the intake notes, you mentioned building a site for Ozzy Osbourne. I've just got to ask, did you ever meet him?
Nope. All of this was remote, and and there's a number of Kelly Clarkson was another one that we worked on, and so a number of celebrity. I think it was in the Warner Group back then that we just ended up working with. But no, sadly, it would have been something to remark upon. That's for sure.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Well, tell me, then tell me about the trees. 1 million trees. First of all, who's counting? Who's counting all these trees, and where did all this happen, and why?
I mean, I was young. I didn't really want a real job, and so I would plant trees during the summer, spring and summer in British Columbia. So I'm from Canada. Currently, I'm in the Toronto area, but would travel to BC for a number of months at a time, and then spend my winters in Central and South America, there where I'd enjoy the sun, and then come back for 10 years or so back in the bush and planting trees. The 1 million is a approximation. It's nobody really has counted those, but. So it was great adventure, great place when you have when you're in your 20s and have a lot of energy to go and work, a lot of freedom, and so it was great.
I've planted one tree, and it was a lot of work. So I applaud you for that. I mean, you're helping the world. I mean, obviously we know the benefits of having trees, and so many are destroyed. But the fact that you've taken the time in your busy world to give back and put that in there, I think is phenomenal. And I think it's something that everybody should know about. And if one can participate somehow to help things and help future generations, I think that's a great quality. So phenomenal.
I know we're going to touch on some points here later in the show, but I want to do because you're touching on our ability to have an impact on the world and choice that we're making. I've been recently joined a community called Mindful Commerce. I can't remember the name of the lady, Chrissy. I can't remember what the last name is, but essentially it's a collection of like-minded business in e-commerce, so whether agencies or app partners who are considering impact on environment and the choices that we make and the way that we operate businesses. So I'm guessing there will be some show notes, but I'll share the URL with you. And I think those who are in the e-commerce space are interested in thinking a little bit more about the green side of their business should definitely look this up.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'd be very interested, and we'll definitely include that in the show notes. That's fantastic. I mean, you definitely, what I gather here by everything that you've told me and, in our couple of conversations, you are mindful. It isn't just about building a business. It isn't about just putting technology out there. I can see by the different things that you've done that you do things with purpose. And that's an important element. It's not just about building, right? It's building with purpose. And I think that's a great quality. So now tell me about the Bass Fishing Performance brand. And as we did it on our first episode, our inaugural episode with my business partner, who is definitely into the world of fishing, as you saw by watching that. Tell me about how did you get into this? Do you fish yourself? Was this just an investment? How did this all play out?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I guess I can include probably the 7 other, which I didn't know about, the 7 other founder title or co-founder titles that you found on my LinkedIn page.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So one of the things that we were doing, my then business partner at Jibe, Steve, who still runs Jibe, is what we called venture technologism. And what I consider so instead of investing capital in some of the more exciting clients that we had, we would invest in technology. Sometimes they would be a startup who didn't necessarily have the means to pay for a full build out. And so what we'd say is, we take some amount of money that we found was fair, and then convert other part of our work, essentially investing through sweat equity into those projects and becoming investor and co-founders, if you will, taking almost like a CTO role and marketing role as well for those businesses. And so we've done this a number of times. The company in question, Buck and Bass, was one of those businesses that we worked with both on the technology and marketing side. They do really wonderful products. They're kind of like what Arc'teryx is to the world of mountaineering and outdoors. Their vision is to see the same for competitive bass fishing. There is a market. I didn't know anything about bass fishing before I started really working with them, and it's such an interesting world. And so many people, especially U.S., Australia, and some in Japan as well, where they're really invested in bass fishing at the competitive level, which maybe sounds weird a little bit for those who haven't seen this, but it is quite exceptional to see.
Yeah. Well, after talking to Michael and Em, and we work together, each and every day, and to learn a little bit more about the competition side of it. I mean, it's intense, right? It's a very intense. And then here you have a product. So, do you advise them on e-commerce? Do you I assume with all the wealth of knowledge you have in the space, do you provide that kind of knowledge base to them?
Yeah, for sure. So both on the technology, on the strategy point. So I don't have tons of background in terms of product development, but sometimes also a little bit of input there. So, I mean, this is what it is, right? So e-commerce there's a lot of recipes out there. If you think also it's easy to build a theme and to purchase one and to start online, where it gets a bit harder, especially over time. 10 years ago, like even getting there was easy, but now with the SaaS platform, like how the tools have evolved, how they've become easier to use for business owners, entrepreneurs, and startups. It's the hump is not so much getting going, but it's not optimization and how you get better and how you can leverage what you're hearing back from your customer through feedback, but also through data, and how to really fine tune that experience to make it more worthwhile for your customer, but also so it can pay back as well for you as on the business side as well.
That's great. You use two phenomenal words there: recipe and optimization, and those are maybe somewhat recipe simplistic word, but really, your game plan in how you're doing things. I think it's really important. So, any entrepreneurs and e-commerce entrepreneurs who are listening, Francis brings an incredible wealth of knowledge, not just on the side that we're about to talk about, personalization, but just e-commerce. And e-commerce, I think, Francis, would you agree that, it is complex, right? It is a complex beast, especially on the marketing side, acquisition, conversion, a lot of those elements that maybe in the early days were a little bit easier, but much more complex now because you're vying for so much attention. Would you agree with that?
Of course, and retention also is very important. And
Huge.
And I know I'm on the interview side of the equation, but I would kind of almost feel like kind of throwing the ball back to you in terms of like agency work, right? So the role of agencies 10, 15 years ago is very different than what it is now. And I'm kind of curious to maybe hear briefly your take on this, how you see your role has evolved and how your insights and knowledge has changed and the way that you can contribute positively to the people that you work with.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a great question. And, you've lived in the agency world and, I think we share that. And, 15 years ago, I was a e-commerce entrepreneur. I mean, I had my own business, my own retail, and I hired an agency. And, the role of that agency, I wasn't privy to all the things that were going on behind the scenes that they were doing, but a lot of it was doing, like getting things done, building that technology, getting that site up and running. We didn't have the world of Shopify. We didn't have BigCommerce. We had off-the-shelf tech that had to be built and taken care of. But I think the role of the agency, at least the way we see it at the SKU agency, is really to be that expert now, to really help a client navigate the complex waters of all these different pieces of software that are coming at them. and all these different marketing initiatives, and being that sounding board, but also being that expert and saying, you know what, based on what we have seen, based on the data, this is the right direction to go. And then test, test, bring back the results. So, we look at it that way. I feel like the role wasn't as much that way maybe 15, 20 years ago.
Right. It's almost like the complexity has moved upstream a little bit. It's less about putting, at the code block level, but putting more at the app level and kind of creating a cohesive strategy to be successful online. Yeah,
no, that's well said. So I want to talk about LimeSpot. I mean, I love this technology. I love the concept of personalization. At the top of the show, I talked about the idea of relating it to the physical world, where you walk in and the salesperson knows who you are. At its core. So tell me a little bit about LimeSpot, and then let's just dive into this concept of personalization, both site, and we'll talk about the email side as well.
Yeah, for sure. So LimeSpot is an app for that is available to Shopify and BigCommerce merchants, and so there's a number of components to this. But the idea is to give the tools for merchants to create better and more engaging journeys for their customers. So whether it be helping discovering new products, whether it is aligning the brand with the expectation of the customers so that they feel more familiar with the brand, or essentially removing a lot of the friction through the entire journey to make the experience more pleasant. And so this has this double effect of making a greater creating greater experience, a greater journey for those shoppers, but also the merchants benefit from it as well, because there's fewer opportunity to let's say be detracted from a more straightforward way to the purchase point. And so it's a really interesting world. And I want to kind of relate maybe, I was shared recently by one of the founders of LimeSpot, the video, one of the videos from a TED Talk that was at the genesis of LimeSpot. And through this video, there's this woman who mentions this going into a grocery store, and I can't remember exactly the deal, but essentially there's 350 types of jams. And she's in front of or maybe it was mustards. I can't remember. And she's in front of it and cannot choose, right? So essentially creating this realizing the problem of choice overload. And so she decides to do this test, and where she has two tables, and then one has, I think, 60 products and one has 6 products. And then customer come to the various table, and she counts the number of people who come to the table. And for the one that's 60 products, there's, I don't know, like say 40 people that come to it within the hour. And for the one that has 6 products, there's 10 people who come. However, when they looked at actually sales, the number of people who purchased from these table, the conversion rate was so much greater. They had 8 out of 10 people buying from the stand that had the 6 jam, whereas they had, a fraction of this buying from the table that had more products. And so I think that part of the personalization, what we can help customers with, is bringing down the choices that they have to a more manageable set, so that they are better able to make decisions, but also feel better about how they decide to and pick their product and making that purchase, because it doesn't feel like they just pick one randomly.
Sure.
But yeah, so very, very interesting, obviously psychology experiment there, but it does shows the value of being able to curate a little bit the experience for your customers.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I really like to always look at the physical world and see, the physical world is, so much of what happens out there happens in the virtual world, if you will. But I always remember as a kid, we had a place, and it's kind of all over the place, all over the country. called In-N-Out Burger. I don't know if you've ever had an In-N-Out burger. So In-N-Out is notorious for having maybe like 5 things on the menu. That's it. Only 5 things. It's a burger made this way, a burger made that way, and a burger made that way, right? As opposed to when you walk into a McDonald's, maybe you see a lot of choices, right? So I always felt choice overload. I'd walk into In-N-Out, easy decision, right? High conversion rate, right? I knew what I wanted, and then I had my favorites. And they would, sometimes depending on the location, the smaller locations, they'd remember who you were. So that's, I think, important. I think, definitely what you're saying, and I'd love to link to that TED Talk, because that's a fascinating concept. And on the e-commerce side, in terms of what LimeSpot's bringing to the table, really helping, right? I mean, our whole goal in e-commerce is to get people, maybe off of our homepage, right, and into the buying process. But how do they do that, right? They have to see something that captures their attention. And the site needs to know who they are, and it needs to know about them, right? So I think those are incredible pieces of technology. And at the end of the day, if we're not converting, we're not building a strong e-commerce business, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. There's also all sorts of, beyond this, like interesting, maybe nefarious side effects to not being able to make the right choices, right? So maybe a little bit less in the e-commerce world. I don't think there's going to be, necessarily negative chains effects to picking the right kind of genes, so to speak. But other tests were made around, let's say, investment, right? So your workplace provides you with, 2 choice where you can put part of your paycheck towards versus, 70 choices, for example. And what they realized is that those who had fewer choice actually were more inclined to actually pay through these programs and save money. So it even goes against sometimes the your own best interest. Having too many choices can backfire on you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we, back to the, the role of an agency, when we're looking at software for clients, we don't, there are, in some sectors, there are many pieces of software that can do a good job, but we spend some time really making sure we understand just a few and bringing those few to the table. And if not, in some cases, maybe it's just a couple of them, because otherwise the client gets paralysis. If we brought them 10 choices on, different types of software, we would never be able to get a true decision out of the situation. So that's very interesting. So just tell me about the under the hood, the technology that LimeSpot, what is happening that we can't see when the software is installed on the site?
Right. So there's a lot of magic happening, which I can't reveal here, but broadly speaking, what we do is that when you install LimeSpot on your store, we crawl the product catalog, and then we use machine learning to understand what the products are as a human, would do, to the extent that AI is capable of doing this. So that's on one end. On the other side, we're looking also at order history. And this allows us to understand, for example, the relationship between different products that have been purchased together, which could serve the base for the, if currently bought together type of algorithms. But also we understand the relationship between people and product. And so we kind of have 2 sides of the equation, right? So on one side, we know which product are likely to be bought by who, and we know who is likely to buy which kind of product. And the third data point here is behavior on site. So we track clicks. We see how people are behaving on site, where they're coming from, where they're going, and our AI tries to infer what the intent of that particular user may be. And so with these kind of 3 data points, we're in a position to really create those personalized recommendations for this user. And there's different types, of course, as you may know. If you go, for example, a 9-page or collection page, the type of recommendation that we will want to put there are more about the discovery process. So maybe your bestsellers, or you may like, for example, or items that are trending. So it's a little bit more higher level, a little bit more about helping you kind of figure out your path through the site. And as we go down the funnel on the product page, on the cart page, even the post-purchase page, it's about giving the opportunity for upsell, cross-sell to increase the average order value, but also to guide the proposed opportunities that the customer may not have seen otherwise.
Fascinating. And, for those who are listening, really to make sure, this is complex technology, but it's behind the scenes. It's happening behind the scenes. What, you as a merchant, you're not going to be intimidated by this technology. It's very, very user friendly, and it's doing the work for you. The AI is taking care of it. And, we hear that a lot. Obviously, AI is creeping into everything that we do in the e-commerce space, but it's important because that concept of AI or machine learning, the system has to continuously learn. How else is it going to know? Just like the salesperson in the brick and mortar store, they have to mentally learn. That is, Jane. She comes in, usually once a week, and she likes this type of product, and that's what the machine learning, that is what the technology is doing behind the scenes. So I think it's fascinating, and reduces, helps reduce that friction, helps reduce the choice, the overload that you talked about, the paralysis that maybe some customers have. You tell me about the adoption rate. Personalization has been around. I mean, Amazon has also obviously been at the forefront of the world of site personalization. How are you seeing the adoption now? In terms of smaller merchants or maybe mid-sized merchants. What's going on in that area?
Yeah. Before answering this question, I want to just go back briefly on what you just said in terms of like AI creeping into our lives. And I think there's, certainly concerns about a lot of AIs, and we're, I think, worried a little bit about how they can encroach into our life. And I think there are ethical answers to this. And I think that, the mechanism like GDPR, for example, which, safeguard the privacy of users is really, really important, and anonymization of customers and third-party cookies and all these things. So I think and I'm very sensitive to this personally. I'm not a big fan of being personalized to, even though if I work for a personalization company, because I value privacy a lot. So I think that, and why I feel comfortable in working in a company like LimeSpot is that this aspect of privacy and respecting individuals and what they share with us through whether they know it or not is really important. So I think of course we never really know what's behind what's happening behind the curtains. So I think that's probably why also for some people feel a lot of resistance against it.
So, and sometimes I just give up and say, they know everything about me, right?
Exactly.
May as well. But I also look at it as it's a phenomenon. It's a great point you bring up, because I know it's a very sensitive topic, and one that is going to be discussed for years to come. This whole and maybe creeping in is the wrong word to use in this situation, but I think ultimately, if it is done with intent to provide consumers with a better experience, that's where it excels. That's where it's really important, right? It's
exactly.
Doing things for good reasons. But I appreciate you bringing that up, because I know that, and I get asked that question a lot by entrepreneurs. How are they doing that? What does that mean? How much do they know about me? So it's great to that LimeSpot takes that very seriously and puts that at the forefront of their mission. That's great.
Yeah,
that's great. So.
Yeah, so tell me
question,
about
the adoption.
The adoption. So it's very interesting. It's a little bit all over the place. So LimeSpot is not the only personalization app in the Shopify ecosystem. There are many, and there one would argue more and more every day as those AI become maybe a little bit easier and more approachable for your regular developer, quote unquote. So what it does is that it democratizes the ability for smaller merchants who are not the Amazons of the world, who are not the big players, to actually access to the technology that were not accessible to them at one point. And so, one of the things that is really interesting to see is in what personalization is a good candidate for is what I call the crawl, walk, run approach. And so it's possible to scaffold, to start really small and use personalization for maybe your upselling, cross-selling cards, right? So that's probably a relatively easy thing to do. And then you can build on this. Now you can add different kind of algorithm throughout your site. And then you can add personalization to emails. You can add personalization and leverage personalization for your shopping ads. We can come back to this, but we also have something called segmented experience, which is a module that allows you essentially to dynamically change any component of the site based on what we know of a given segment of our customers. And so and the reason I'm bringing this up now is that there's kind of like no reason not to personalize, in 2021, 22. And yet there are still a lot of brands out there who do not seem to have taken this particularly seriously in their strategy, while some other are really pushing the boundaries. And it's not often about the volume, the size of a merchant. So we've seen some smaller brand who really are aggressive in their personalization approach, and we see some larger brand who tend to be a little bit more, maybe a bit less sophisticated in how they do this. So yes, there's more and more personalization, and yet there's still so much opportunity, and so many merchants have yet to invest in that side of their online strategy.
Well, that's great. I mean, it's huge opportunity. Then is really what you're saying. Do you see that? Is there a traffic threshold where personalization wouldn't work in terms? Basically, what I'm saying is, if my traffic is low, will personalization not be, or is it really does it work no matter what?
Mm-hmm. The answer to this is that it depends on your app and the technology that's powering it. In the case of LimeSpot, not really. So there's not really any threshold, but I'll come back to this in a moment. But however, some other apps may see this, and one of the reasons is that we at LimeSpot use signals, so essentially billions of signals from all of our sites, all of our customers' sites, to train our AI, whereas some less sophisticated AI may require to train their AI on a single site. And so if you don't have a lot of traffic, it's possible that what we call the warm-up time to be able, between the moment you install and the moment that the AI is optimized to deliver meaningful personalized recommendation, can be pretty long based on that traffic measure. Now, one thing that should be known also is that the number of products may influence how well personalization can happen, but also how much value it can bring to the merchant. So if I do have 20 products, likely AIs are not going to be, there's just not enough data for AIs to be able to really do a good job there. So for one side, the other one is it worth really to pay for an app when having such a small number of products, you could do a good job to merchandise manually. So there's a traffic component and the product, not even the SKU component as well to consider when considering AI.
Interesting. No, that's good. That's very interesting. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of email. I'm a huge fan of Klaviyo. We're Klaviyo partners. You guys, list as one of your features. Obviously, what we're initially talking here about is site personalization, but you guys offer email personalization and you integrate with Klaviyo. How does that look and how does it work? Email alone is already pretty powerful, but how does the personalization side make it even more powerful?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. It's being used more and more in that kind of crawl, walk, run approach that I've mentioned earlier. This is kind of like between the crawl and walk. So you typically would install personalized recommendation on your site, and once it's working well, then go to the next step, which typically is that email recommendation. And so you through the LimeSpot app, you can create those widgets. So it could be you choose the number of products, for example, that would appear in an email. You choose the type of algorithm you may select as well. So is it a bestseller? Is it a trending? So what it is that you want to display to your to the recipients of those emails? And then widgets are created, and then you insert in your Klaviyo, or we do support, I think at this point, probably around 15 different ESPs to import in their template. And then when these emails are sent, we provide recommendations, what we call live product recommendations. So this means that when the email is open is when the recommendations are generated for that customer. And so what this means is that if you send an email on a Friday to a customer of yours and the email remains unopened, and then they go on your site on the Saturday and then click around and then open the email on the Sunday, what they're going to see, the product recommendation on Sunday that they see in their email will include any new learnings that we've made from their visit on the Saturday. And of course, we cache this for some amount of time so that not every single time they open the email, they get different types of recommendation. But this allows us to really be kind of at the latest, with the latest information that we have today about this customer, being able to be as relevant as possible in that medium.
It's a phenomenon. I mean, it's going back to that adoption rate. When I hear these things, and again, I know a lot about this world of all of these different technologies and how powerful they can be. But this simple technology, well, complex under the hood, what it does, but the simplicity of it, to me, it feels like a no-brainer. Why would I not add this to my site if I'm spending a lot of money driving traffic? And I've built a beautiful site that I feel is very, conversion friendly. Why would I not add this component both to my site as well as my email marketing initiatives? Just seems like a no-brainer to me.
I think you're right, and not only from a conversion standpoint or performance overall, but the experience as a customer to have the entire funnel from email to on-site experience, and even we have the ability to integrate with transactional email. So your thank you for buying our product email could also include some personalization. So tying this entire journey for the customer is something that you benefit, of course, as a brand, but as a consumer, it's really important as well, in that you feel understood, that the brand is delivering to your expectations that you have of it. And we've seen a lot of little handwritten notes and packages that are being delivered. That's the same thing, more or less in the digital world, but it does make you feel like that they get you, that you're a value customer, that the merchant that you're buying from actually is paying attention to the experience that you have with them.
Sure. You want to feel special, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's a huge part of a shopping experience. So I think it's phenomenal. I feel that it's definitely something that every e-commerce merchant that has not put this on their radar in terms of an initiative for 2022 and beyond absolutely should put that on there and evaluate LimeSpot. Take a look and see how the technology, get a demo. And we're definitely putting this in front of all of our clients, because I think that you don't want to miss out, right? You don't want to miss out. You want to capitalize on the opportunity, capitalize on all the traffic that you're working so hard and spending so much money to drive to your site. So no, I think it's phenomenal. Tell me, we talked about choice overload. You also had this very interesting, the non-zero sum concept, that you mentioned, and you said that, e-commerce can be a non-zero sum, or NZS. Elaborate on that for me. I'm very interested by that.
Yeah. So just in prep for this talk, I sent you an email mentioning this, and I think the genesis of this, and I will go back maybe to the Drupal days that you mentioned, is something that I've learned through open source. And so non-zero sum is, in kind of game theory, is where there's not necessarily a predefined outcome. It's not Ramin or Francis that wins, but rather there could be a number of outcomes, and the idea is that Ramin and Francis can win together the game. So open source does this a lot, because you're developing code that you can contribute to a community, which potentially your competitors could reuse to then leverage in their own product and compete against you in some way. So it's the concept of frenemies, right? Taking this to a bit of a different level in the context of e-commerce, I was mentioning the non-zero sum, where merchants win, but not at the expense of the customer, right? So merchant makes more money, but the customer gets a better journey. I mentioned Chrissy and their mindful commerce. This is the same thing, right? So we don't have to choose between having excellent fulfillment process through e-commerce and selling great products and having zero consideration for the environment. So there doesn't need to be a loser in this game, so to speak. And I think that it goes back obviously to personal values and business mission, but I think there's opportunity in e-commerce, certainly in personalization, to have and consider all actors in that. Again, the idea of the game being winners to some degree as we move business forward.
Fascinating. And let me just jump back to the LimeSpot technology. You mentioned something about the dynamic, I believe it was dynamic content, or just to elaborate on that, because that's very intriguing.
Yeah, thank you for asking. This is our latest product. It's pretty exciting. Essentially, what we allow a merchant to do is segment their audiences, their shoppers, or rather segment their shoppers or audiences into segments. This can be based on specific behaviors, such as items in specific collection that they look at. It can be based on what they've purchased in the past, but also provenance, IP address, for example, where they're located in the world, or UTM parameters that they may be landing on your site from it. And once you have these segments, we allow you to dynamically change the content of the site to best match the expectation of the customers that are in segments would have of you. So, a use case of this could be a repeat customer versus a new potential customer. The new potential customer may respond well to an experience where you're building trust with the brand, rather than just, here's a 10% discount. Maybe what they want to know is that, going back to the non-zero sum, that you're a ethical brand, that you're sourcing your etc. So you can do some building, so you can change your hero image to respond to this. You can change the content of the page to respond to this. Your offer may be a little bit different. Whereas somebody who's come to your site before, maybe there's opportunity to present them with a bundle instead, because they've already established some trust with your brand and maybe are ready to invest a little bit more. And so it's really the ability to dynamically align again to one's expectation of how they see your brand, and you as a merchant responding to this and presenting the most appropriate experience possible.
Fascinating. I maybe liken this to, I used to always marvel at the fact that maybe you're an apparel brand, and in between seasons, is it colder in one region, you're showing that you're showing that banner or that slider image that is of the coat and the warm, want to stay warm. But you're also selling that product. You're selling products to people in Florida, and Florida is going to be much warmer. So you're going to show a different image. And if you show that coat to people in Florida, they're going to look at you sideways, right? Why am I looking at this? I don't need a coat. I need some great shorts. So that ability. So that's fascinating. I think really, again, powerful personalization, not just showing everybody the same thing, showing individualized information. And this can all be done with this technology. I mean, the LimeSpot technology seems, again, I would say no brainer. I would add this in a second if I was a merchant, because I want to take advantage of everything that's possible out there. Mm-hmm. So very
you put
interesting.
You put it well. That's actually a great example, and it's relevance, right? Not only subtly aligning with their expectation, but be relevant to your customer. I think that you put this quite well. It's super important.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you to take your LimeSpot hat off for a second. And if we've talked about this, you've worn many hats, and I want you to go back and put your agency hat on. And we talked about the role of an agency. So if you're going to be advising a direct consumer brand, what 3 things would you tell them they need to focus on in order to grow traffic, in order to convert sales? What 3 things would you advise them to do?
Mm-hmm. Well, even with my LimeSpot hat off, I want to say personalization. It is important, and if you want to compete with the Amazons of the world, that is key. Site speed, I think that, we always hear these like funny figure about if you shave like a 0.1 second,
Right.
you can make 100 grand more or something like this.
Sure.
I mean, it's exemplifying a problem and a solution, but more and more, and I think it is important, and people don't have the patience. There's a great movement towards headless. You may have noticed, and your listeners may also have noticed this. And part of this is to be able to address some of the challenge that the platforms have traditionally have, although it's still not necessarily, not all brands can afford these kind of solutions just quite yet. I think that addresses this specifically. And then I want to say, special touch, as I mentioned earlier, in those handwritten notes and packages, your fulfillment, like it's all about differentiation and being able to connect more personally, being empathetic to your customer. If there's problems, help them solve problems. If there's a return, be kind and contribute to them, even if the experience doesn't turn necessarily into a sale, that they at least have a positive experience of working with your brand and purchasing from it.
Well said. Well said. I love that. And, I guess, but taking us, circling back to, the complexities of, 20 years ago, it was it was really building a site. That was the hard part, right? Now it's really all of these elements that, of driving traffic and what you can do with that traffic and all of these technologies that come into play. So no, those are great recommendations. So you can put your LimeSpot hat back on again.
As a listener, consumer of your video cast here, the one topic that that ties, especially in that last part of last, I guess, third idea or third recommendation, is the focus on loyalty, right? We know that it's harder and harder to acquire a customer. It's getting more and more expensive. And so how can we delight our customers with remarkable experience so that they're loyal, that they continue to buy from us, and that we don't have to spend so much money to reacquire them for whatever it might be. So my request to you, if I could make one, would be to touch on and get some people who are in the loyalty space to come and talk with you and share their insights with your listeners.
Well, the good news is we did an interview with Jack Johnson over at Loyalty Lion. Phenomenal interview, awesome. Fascinating, very interesting. And obviously the topic was about loyalty and understanding and retention and how important that is, right? I mean, really, again, the simple concept to me is if you're working on driving all this traffic, get them get them in your email list, get them on SMS, personalize the experience for them, provide them with a loyalty, give them a reason to stay on with you, right? I mean, these are all, again, maybe there's a little bit of paralysis out there because there's so many different technologies. Which one do you focus on? But if I'm talking to a client, those are my go-tos. And you're right, loyalty is super important. And so thank you. And we'll be rolling the interview with Jack Johnson from Loyalty Lion soon. And I think you guys all share a common component here, is that you're bringing. You're part of organizations that are incredibly important to the progression of e-commerce, the next phase, if you will, where e-commerce is headed. So I love it. I love it. So let me shift gears here, and we like to do towards the end of all of our podcasts, we like to do a little rapid fire questions, just so we can get to know you even better. So if you're okay with that, I'd like to roll out just a few of those questions. So tell me, what gets you excited to wake up every day and tackle the day? What is that one thing that gets you excited?
Helping people. I manage partnership. I do sales. I do connect with customer. It's solving problems for our customer, helping people.
That's great. Great answer. Great answer. I can tell by everything you said before in this interview that you are definitely very focused on the helping. But thank you for solidifying that for us.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you have, when you wake up every morning, you need something to get you going. What's your drink of choice?
It's espresso, long espresso. Yeah, for sure.
Very nice.
More than one.
What? Anything in it, or just straight?
Black and strong. Yes.
Wow.
That's the Frenchy heritage. I think that's the Latin heritage, perhaps. That's surfacing.
I think at one point I read, this is a long time ago, that tea was actually the number one product or beverage consumed. But so far we've done a number of these podcasts. Nobody's mentioned tea. Nobody's drinking tea. Apparently, it's all coffee, and everybody has their own unique way. We should probably just do a podcast just on. I'm sure there are plenty of them out there just on coffee. So, if you weren't doing the job that you're doing right now at LimeSpot, what else would you be doing?
It's a good question. Tough question. Partnerships is what I love, because it goes back to that non-zero sum opportunity, right? It's the ability to pull a bunch of different stakeholders into a common goal and creating something bigger than the sum of the parts. That's really my passion.
I love it. That's great. So this one, I'm always intrigued by the answers that I get to this one. What is your go-to SaaS, service as a software? What do you love? What can you not live without on a daily basis?
Oh dear, that's a tough question. I want to say alarm clock. It is a service. I use a podcast to wake up. That's what that's an essential one. Not my favorite, of course. It's a hard question to answer because I work remotely. I'm in communication with all sorts of teams, with partner agencies like SKU, and so I use a variety of tools that. So it's saying it's kind of asking a carpenter if they prefer a hammer or a drill. I think it's an unfair question, so I'll leave it at this, and maybe we need to.
You're the first one who's never answered that question. I love it. I love it. I love it. You're declining to answer because there's so many great pieces of software out there. By the way, I would have a hard time choosing too. I really would. Honestly, I would. I should ask myself that question, and I bet you I would say, well, I like this one, but I really also like this one too, and this one is essential. I'm with you.
I don't know. I want to see your microphone. Seems like to be a pretty important piece of the gear that you can't work with right now. So,
right. Makes me sound with that bassy voice, right?
Yeah, of course, yes.
Very good. Well, very nice. Well, Francis, it has been a true pleasure, and I mean that honestly. I mean, I enjoyed talking to you the first time. I honestly, I had to dive in and figure out. I need to know more about you, and I figure, well, what better vehicle than to ask you, to come on to the podcast and share your knowledge. I mean, you have so much of it and very interesting perspective on e-commerce. It's not just about driving traffic. It's not just about, building. It's really, including everybody and not necessarily competing, but learning from each other. And I think that's a phenomenal trait. So I thank you very much for being a part of this. And I'm sure our listeners are going to take a lot of information. Before we wrap up, can you tell them, how they can find out more information about LimeSpot? And then also, if you're interested, if they can reach out to you through social media, how do they reach you there? You don't have to, but if you'd like to, go for it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first, thank you also for the invite. It's great to speak with like-minded people, and I'm glad that you want to put a little bit of fun in all the seriousness of e-commerce business. So thank you so much for this.
Right. Sure.
A few things. I think that we should put together some sort of offer between SKU and LimeSpot here for those who want to trial LimeSpot for the first time. So perhaps we can follow up with something in the notes.
Absolutely.
So for one, to limespot.com is where you can find us. We have some great white papers and playbooks. The ultimate guide to upsell, cross-sell is one of them. Some ideas around segmented experience, how you can slice and dice your shopper to create better experience. I think there's a lot of great information that you can find on limespot.com. And then lastly, people can reach out to me on LinkedIn, which we can also include in the show note. And I'd be more than happy to engage with anybody who has question about personalization, e-commerce in general, and maybe tree planting.
Yes, ask Francis everything. He's very, very knowledgeable, and absolutely, we'd love to do an offer like that. I think it would be great. We put it in the show notes. We'll send it out as part of when we push the podcast out there. So that would be great, and people should try it. Again, it's a no-brainer, right? But maybe if there is thought and you're you're vacillating, you're not sure, why not try it out? And this is a great opportunity, I think, to try it out and see what it does and ultimately see how sales lift, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, very nice. So thank you again for being a part of this podcast. And we look forward, and maybe I'll have you on, love to have you on again, and we can drill down into a completely different topic. I mean, there's so many micro topics, right, that are part of the e-commerce space. So with that, thank you for joining. All right. That brings us to the end of another episode of the e-commerce revolution. We had a blast today. Francis was a great guest. Really enjoyed. I mean, I could talk about this all day. Obviously, we have some time limits here that we can't go over. But thank you very much for joining us. We'll have upcoming episodes to all of our various topics that we'll be covering over the course of our journey here. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and give us a review on any of the podcast networks that you use to consume your podcast. So thank you very much, everybody. See ya.
This is just the beginning.
If you enjoyed this episode of the E-commerce Revolution podcast, please subscribe to our channel on YouTube or drop us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you very much.